Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate and the second episode of a summer series, Summer Deep Dives. And today we're discussing Mansfield Town. So I'm delighted to be joined by Sam Binch, a Stags fan and founder of MTFC Musings. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time. I suppose the first question on Mansfield Town is you've put together 4 promotion challenges over the last 7 seasons, been a game away from promotion a couple of times, but not quite got over the line. So what do you think are the ingredients that Mansfield have missed in the last 7 seasons that they need to find this summer?
Hi, Gab. Yeah, I think it's a mixture of things, but just focusing on the last few seasons, I think it's the defensive side of things that we need to shore up. I think we were either the top or the joint top scorers last season in League Two. So you've got that attacking base to build on, and we've got pretty much we're going to go into the season, it seems like, with pretty much the same attacking players. So you'd hope that the same level of performance will be there from them, maybe even a bit of improvement. But who knows? It's League Two. There's inconsistency. But yeah, it's the defence. We need actual defenders. For a start, defenders playing in the right positions, and
I can't believe it's not defenders.
Yeah. So obviously we're the early recruitment looks good on that front. Bought into natural defenders. So hopefully Clough has realised that, and he's taking steps to rectify that.
Yeah, well, let's hope that's the case. I think with Mansfield Town under Nigel Clough, there has been, as much as Nigel Clough has delivered very competitive results at Mansfield Town, and you've not been far off at all. I suppose if there's one criticism, it does feel like there has been a sense of square pegs in round holes in recent times. And I wanted to ask you, how much of that do you think has been to injuries? Because let's be honest, there were quite a few of them at certain points last season. How much of that was down to perhaps the building of the squad? And how much of it is down to Nigel Clough himself, perhaps liking versatile players like your Elliot Hewitts and like your Lucas Akins, who are just prepared to go anywhere and just do a job?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture. I mean, I think he does like versatile players, as you say. Obviously, at the start of last season, we had a defensive Ollie Hawkins, who is obviously mainly known as a striker, I would say, rather than a centre half. But he's
not the quickest, is he?
No, he's not the quickest, and we adapted our formation to suit him basically by going to 3 at the back. That was always the big plan. Who else did you have there? John Joe O'Toole, who had a brilliant 6 months prior to last season, but last season never got going, didn't find the form, got injured.
He's good on the ball, though, I always think, O'Toole.
Pardon, I didn't catch that.
I always think John Joe O'Toole's good on the ball because he's got a history of, again, a common theme. He's got a history of playing further forward in midfield. And I think it was Clough, maybe at Burton, who converted him into a centre half.
Yeah, and when he played the previous season, he was fantastic. He was one of the main catalysts for turning our season around, I think. But yeah, he just never got going. Whether it was because he'd got you're always a bit cynical, aren't you? When we give someone a 2.5-year contract at his age, you sort of think, is that what he was waiting for? But I don't know. I give him the benefit of the doubt because it sounds like he did struggle with injuries throughout and never really got going. But we didn't sign adequate cover at left back, so we only had Stephen McLaughlin. Clough thought that would be enough because he played pretty much every game the season before, which I don't really see as a reason for not having a natural backup or another left-footed defender at least. And then there's no doubt that injuries did play a part, but I think in defensive areas less so. I would say it was more going forward where the injuries took hold. Apart from McLaughlin, obviously, which is a big blow, but he did play half the season. He did play up until December and wasn't quite in the same form, but was reportedly playing with an injury as well. So you don't know if he's going to come back the same. But we have signed Callum McDonald, who's a natural left back or left wing back. So he has sorted that problem. We have signed Bailey Cargill, who's a natural centre back and left footed.
I like that signing.
Yeah, obviously we bought in Alfie Kilgore in January and Callum Johnson, who are natural fullback and natural centre back. So he has clearly addressed he has noticed the issue, but why it took him so long to notice is another question. But at least we've took steps to try and put that right for next season. But we are going to miss Elliot Hewitt, obviously, who's not going to feature until probably 2024 at the earliest. And he was our best player last season, not just best defender, best player all round, I would say. So yeah, he's going to be a big miss.
Yeah, I'm glad he got that recognition, even though it's a real shame for him sort of getting injured, because I've always felt he's maybe previously been a little bit underrated, because he's not like Callum Johnson, who's like a super confident operator who can get up the flank and loves to attack the final third. But I think he's a really intelligent operator who uses the ball really smartly. Has some good relationships with, if you're playing the wide man in a diamond and things like that, and he just does the simple things well, and very versatile, as we've touched on. So I'm glad he got that recognition, even though it's a real shame he picked up that long-term injury. But I want to take it back to what you said earlier, which was giving McLaughlin a 2.5-year deal, or was it John Joe O'Toole a 2.5-year deal?
Yeah.
O'Toole, yeah. And I feel like Nigel Clough does seem to show a lot of faith in experienced players, which you can kind of understand. But this summer, there's 6 academy graduates that have signed professional terms for Mansfield Town, which doesn't feel like a stereotypical Mansfield Town Football Club type move. So do you think there's a bit of a changing of the process?
I think that's the plan, yeah. I mean, the academy as it is and the training ground has only been built 2 or 3 years now, I think, and the academy's recently gone up in a level. I think it might be level 3 now or something like that. Good. So the progress is there, and we have a director, Steve Hymas, who pumps a lot of money and concentrates on the youth side of things. So yeah, you probably haven't seen in the past that number of youth team players securing professional contracts. I think there's always been 2 or 3 a season that have got them. And
any you're particularly excited by?
I'm not sure in the current crop. We have seen, obviously, James Gale didn't come through the academy, but he is an exciting prospect who's, I think he's 21 or 22, but has come onto the scene in the last few games and been given a chance and scored some crucial goals and, not looked out of place.
Could he be a bit of a wild card for next season, Sam, as well, James Gale, if he can maybe catch teams out a little bit sort of unexpectedly? Because he definitely brings something different to the attack, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think Clough did say, obviously we've signed Will Swan on the permanent deal, and Clough sort of indicated that he might look to bring in someone on loan, a young striker from higher up the leagues. But James Gale, he said James Gale's emergence has sort of changed the need for that. So it does sound like he will be sticking around and getting plenty of game time. And he definitely looks promising. He can shoot with both feet. I think he's 6'3". He's not easily muscled off the ball. So yeah, he does. I think he will get game time. And obviously he'll fill the hole that Danny Johnson has vacated, even though we didn't really see him on the pitch that often, certainly last season. But yeah, I think Makeel Abdullah is one from the youth team who's scored a lot of goals as well.
He's a striker.
Young striker, yeah. I think he's left-footed. So he looks promising. I think he scored between 25 and 30 goals at youth level last season.
Oh, right.
And he travelled with the first team squad a few times, so he was on the bench a few times. So you might see him in the Papa John's or something like that.
Or maybe it could be a National League North or Northern Premier League loan as well, probably at some stage.
No, wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. Yeah, we have just seen one of our academy graduates today, Alistair Smith, who's he just signed for Lincoln. Managed to get to League One before Mansfield. Obviously, wasn't deemed good enough here by Clough a few years ago, and he's worked his way up the leagues, and so it does show that there was some talent there. If it could have been nurtured in the right way. So hopefully with the academy now in place, it all seems to be heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, on the academy, Sam, do you see it as a sort of hindrance that Mansfield are in the vicinity of your Derby counties and your Nottingham Forests, where the best young players are getting sort of hoovered up by those clubs, or do you see it as an advantage actually that there's players that might just miss out on a Forest or a Derby that Mansfield at a certain age group could possibly look at picking up?
Yeah, I won't pretend to be an expert on it, but from what I understand, how we've gone about recruiting players for the academy previously, it's been through the process of exit trials, so players that have been released higher up by perhaps bigger clubs, and we've sort of took them under our wing. So you'll often find that they've been in an academy, as you say, maybe Derby, Leicester, Forest, that sort of area, and we sort of give them another chance, see if we can get something out of them. But there was last week one of our 14-year-old goalkeepers was signed by Leicester City.
Yes.
So there is obviously talent. It's not that it does seem that we are starting to get the talent through that could rival the bigger clubs in the area. But yeah, like you say, it is, it's only 40 minutes to Nottingham, both Nottingham clubs, Derby, 40 minutes to Sheffield, Wednesday, Sheffield United. So yeah, as you say, there've always been big clubs around us who've perhaps swept up talent before we could, and in the years where we didn't even have an academy for quite a few years. So that process has obviously been skipped in over a generation. So yeah, but at least it looks promising now, and yeah, hopefully we'll start to see the fruits of that.
Yeah, of course. And then this is another big thing for me, because I think with the geography of any club, there's always going to be certain advantages of that geography and certain disadvantages. And sometimes the trade-off, looks a bit differently at some clubs than others. But I think the key, and the most successful clubs always look at the positives and try and make the most out of that, rather than use the disadvantages as an excuse, as that's why we can't produce players. And it's great that Mansfield Town have shown that commitment to youth. I want to ask you about Nigel Clough, because he did, it was quite a late decision, I think it was, to renew his contract and confirm that he would be taking charge for this season. Do you consider yourself a supporter of Nigel Clough and where he's taking Mansfield Town?
I think we should have done better last season than we did. I think that although we obviously only missed out by 1 goal, so perhaps it is a bit cruel, but I think we should have been in the top 7 with the squad we have. I know we had a lot of injuries, but I don't see that as an excuse for missing out on the top 7. But I like that he's in January in the summer. He is looking to address the problems. So I'm hoping that he's, it seems to me as if someone has perhaps in the club has had a word with him and said, you've been here 2 years, we've been in and around it. He has proved that he's capable of building a team challenging for promotion. There's times in the past where we've perhaps pushed managers, such as David Flitcroft, who got us, into 4th position and then was sacked when he lost in the playoffs. There's been a lot of talk amongst fans in the past. Why didn't we go again the next season? Take time, rebuild. It's perhaps a thought that we've tried. We've tried throwing the money at it, and that's not to say that we're not still, one of the clubs with a bigger budget. I don't think we're quite as high up as we were before with Wrexham and Notts County, Stockport, Salford.
But I think you tried to, if you don't mind me jumping in on that point, you did try to go for the John Dempster experiment, I suppose, where you made the academy manager the first team manager, and unfortunately that didn't go quite so well. And then you went from him to Graham Coghlan, which was completely the other side of the spectrum. But I think it's so difficult to sometimes, when you've had a period, I think Salford are going to find a similar thing now, where you've had a period of trying to go for promotion and it's not quite come off for you for one reason or another, and then it's that balance where we still want to be competitive but we also want to introduce a developmental element to that, but sometimes it's very difficult to do those two things simultaneously.
I think like I say, I think there is a desire to take a more considered, perhaps a slower approach rather than throwing money at it. And I think Nigel Clough, he's a safe pair of hands. He's loyal. He's turned jobs down at Burton in the past from bigger clubs. He always stays at clubs for a long time. So I think, and he's the word is that he doesn't splash cash unnecessarily. He will look after the owner's money like it's his own. So I
Yeah,
think
that
very
was
much.
the Burton way as well.
Yeah,
That was when he worked with Ben Robinson. That was the thing that I remember hearing. I think it was Gary Rowett talking about this actually, where Ben Robinson was very big on giving the managers support and making them feel supported. But there was a thing about make sure you turn the lights off when you leave the office, and make sure we look after our money thriftily. And maybe Nigel Clough, because that was where he started out as his career, and at Derby did a similar job, sort of cutting the wage bill down. So it feels like that's something that Nigel Clough is very, like you say, loyal and very reliable in that sense. He's not going to put his own, how could I win promotion, make myself look good in the next year over the sort of the long-term needs of the club, which I think in this day and age has to be admired.
yeah, and obviously there's been a bit of frustration with that side of things as well, because Clough always, every pre-season, he hasn't done it this season actually, but in the past few years, he's always put sort of a limit on how many players he wants, outfield players. I think he says around 17 or 18 outfield players, then a few from the academy and the goalkeepers, obviously. And it's been a bit of a source of frustration because obviously we're not privy to the finances, but it's always seemed as if John Radford will back his manager, and it's sort of he's imposing this limit on himself, which he doesn't necessarily need to do, and that's left us
It's
short.
almost like he can't sometimes change that mindset of protecting
Yeah,
the.
it's
Yeah.
left us short in some positions, and that's why we end up with players who can fill in multiple positions. And you just sort of think, well, have you been told that you need to do that, or is that just your self-imposed way of looking at it? As I say, it might be that.
And actually, if we're going to look at this, Sam, from a financial perspective, I would actually rather Mansfield Town had their backup right back or their backup right wing back as being a project developmental 20-year-old player, rather than have Jordan Barry or Lucas
Yeah,
Akins there. Do you know what I mean? Because that way you've got a chance of developing someone where if your first choice right back or right wing back gets injured, you've got someone ready to cook, or if you sell on or if they leave, you've got someone coming in. So that actually, if we're looking at it from a financial perspective, that investing a little bit more now in a project player that can also cover, be short-term cover, is actually, maybe that's better than maybe the false economy option of going for an experienced centre forward in out of position.
yeah. I can't remember off the top of my head many players under sort of 24 who Clough has signed on permanent deals. So it's always been, sort of either ready-made or slightly older players who have signed on the permanent deals, and then we've gone to the bigger clubs for young loan players like Harbottle and Swan and Bishop, who we had, the goalkeeper from United a couple of seasons ago. So yeah, it does seem he doesn't want to necessarily. I don't know if there's just no one available who fits the bill, but at times last season it was just a case of surely we could have found a left back capable who is a left back who wouldn't have broke the bank. I think Northampton signed like 3 or 4 players when they had an injury crisis who they just seemingly plucked from nowhere. It's
Yeah.
like how have we been playing the whole season with with Jordan Bowery at left wing back? Surely
Yeah. That's such an interesting point to probably expand on, actually, Sam, because yes, injuries are a massive factor, and obviously when you have the volume of injuries that you had at times second half of last season, especially, I think that's obviously going to have a hindrance. But I also would say that you maybe open yourself up to that risk if you have one natural option in certain positions. That's kind of you've sort of opened yourself up to that risk.
Yeah, I mean, especially when it happened the season before as well with suspensions and injuries, and you're sort of thinking, just get 2 players for every position, regardless of the quality. Just it's someone who is a natural player in that position must be preferable. But he didn't seem to see it that way. We did get a bit unlucky with Lewis Page, who we bought in on. Well, it was November by that time. He came in on a 1-month deal, but he's obviously got a horrendous history with injuries, and then played in a reserve game and got injured. I think ended up playing 45 minutes while he was here. Went on to sign for Gillingham. So perhaps you could say that's a bit of bad luck, but it wasn't as if his history of injuries were unknown. But yeah, as I say, hopefully we've got 2 left backs now. We're in the market for another centre back who can possibly cover full back. So if we can get that player in, hopefully we look to have 2 players for each position going into next season for the defence. And I think the midfield and attack is pretty much sorted. He's not indicated any desire to sign an attacking player or a midfield player. So obviously we need a goalkeeper still. It looks like that will probably be Christy Pym. But there's some issues on his end. I think possibly related to the Instagram post he put out about Darren Ferguson when I don't know if you saw that, but during the comeback by Sheffield Wednesday in the playoffs, he put a post on Instagram saying something like "brilliant management" or something like that. And I think he's had a fallout with Ferguson in the past, so I think that's put some stumbling blocks in the deal because Posh are obviously unhappy with that, and he's still contracted to them, so possibly going through a disciplinary procedure. But yeah, it looks like he'll be the number 1 choice. For
Listen, I don't want to castigate the lad too much because I think in this social media age where any of us at any one time can sort of feel something at a particular moment and then make a really bad mistake, and that's not me excusing his behavior, but I think I wouldn't want to judge the lad too much on a one-off moment. So from my point of view, I think let's give him the benefit of the doubt and hope he can learn from that experience. But I do want to ask you about David Sharp, actually, because he's been at the club for 3 years now. What have you made of his impact on the club, and has he helped take some of the pressure away from John and Carolyn Radford in terms of running the club on the day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think it's been impressive overall. I mean, when he first came in, he was titled as a director of football rather than what he is now, which is chief executive, I think.
Chief executive seems more financial than footballing, doesn't it?
Yeah, from what I understand, he's basically runs the club on a day-to-day whilst John and Carolyn are in Portugal. I think they have said that they are going to be a bit more hands-on this year, so I'm not sure where his role will sit. But from what I understand, he's in charge of all the financial, logistical sides of the transfer deals and that sort of thing, working with Simon Clough and Nigel Clough to get deals over the line. But yeah, it is different from when he first came in because he was director of football, and I don't think it was a role he'd held previously at Wigan. I think he was more, a chairman or coach, something along those lines. So that was a bit bizarre when he first came in, and you're thinking, well, he's not really got any experience of this.
But I think he was stepping in for now was it his grandfather, I think, Whelan, who was kind of at an age where he probably couldn't do much. So I feel like it was a different role, but different title certainly. But I imagine he had a fair bit to do with Wigan in terms of the day-to-day. I don't know if they had a sporting director or anything while he was there. So it might be that he did quite a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and it's just a different title.
Yeah, I think he did, and there's been a lot of improvements. As a fan that you've seen a lot through those years with boring stuff like we've got a new ticketing system that we didn't have before. That's the website actually works rather than the old one, which was not the best.
Well, these things make a difference, don't they? They're important to how fans feel about the running of the club, and
of course, and I think he's a professional. He seems a professional operator. People speak well about him. I think he's got plenty of contacts in the game from his time at Wigan, and you've only got to go on his Instagram to see the sort of famous faces that he's mixing with on his holidays and things like that. So it does seem he's got contacts in the game that obviously will come in useful. So yeah, I think he's generally viewed positively. There was a stage, obviously, I think when Clough first came in, he may be a bit, bowed down to him a little bit with the age of the players we were signing, Akins, O'Toole, Jamie Murphy, that sort of thing. But I think in January there was a definite change towards the ages of players we signed. So Callum Johnson, Alfie Kilgore, Lewis Reed and Davis Keeler-Dunn, all 24, 25, 26, which is what he sort of indicated he would be looking to do when he came in. Players who, if they do well, you might be able to sell them on in the future.
You've got to be careful of that sometimes, Sam, as well, though, because I've seen situations like the one at Tranmere where last summer Tranmere brought in broadly quite a young profile of player. And I think they had James Vaughan as sporting director at that point. And I think that was because the Palioses wanted a sort of younger squad, a more sustainable model. But then they've also got a manager in Mickey Mellon who liked sort of experienced players, and they wanted to try and be competitive in the here and now. And sometimes if you've got a manager that wants one or naturally feels like they work best with one thing, and a board and a sporting director that feels like they want to move towards another, it can create sort of some sort of tension, some sort of conflict of interest. And sometimes you can negotiate that and find ways around it if there's an understanding, if there's respectful dialogue between them. But I wouldn't say it's ideal necessarily to have that if there is a sort of conflict or differences of opinion. I think in an ideal world, you'd probably prefer to have an alignment right the way through the club.
Yeah, it was just a brief 1 or 2 windows where it just seemed as if, because I think Sharp did an interview, I think it might be on the D3, D4 podcast when he first joined, and he was
I remember that actually
saying all the right things about signing players of the right age, perhaps a little bit of an ideal view of League Two, developing players, etc., and he just seemed to veer away from that. But I think we do seem to be heading back in that direction. I mean, we did have the oldest squad in League Two last season, and I'd probably say one of the slowest as well. So those players that we signed in January, whilst they are towards they're not really young at 24, 25, 26, they're in the prime, and they've all played plenty of league games, but just perhaps that bit of freshness that could that perhaps we were missing legs a little in the team. I think that's been addressed to some extent. I still think we could do with more pace, but in attacking areas, but I don't necessarily think that's going to be forthcoming unless something crops up that's too good to turn down.
Yeah, well, I suppose you've got Will Swan and James Gale, and I can't really see Cloughy building his attack around pace. I think he'll probably want to introduce it, but not make that the primary sort of strength, if you like. So I think he'll be hoping that Swan and Gale. I mean, how big a season do you think Will Swan can have next year?
I think if he stays fit, he could be. Well, he scored how many? I think he scored 10 last season, and he had quite a few periods out injured, and he wasn't necessarily, always a regular starter when he was fit. I think if he plays a lot of games, I think he can get 20 goals. I think he'll get at least 15 goals, providing he stays fit. I think he's a really good prospect. He's not lightning quick, but he's quick enough. He's got good movement. He scores headers, scores poachers goals. He can take players on. So yeah, I really like the look of him. I really like that deal that we've done. I'm surprised that they weren't, perhaps someone from League One who might be looking at him as a project for the future. But I think perhaps we've got in at the right time there, and obviously he's already been here. He knows what the club's about. It's local for him. He's from Mansfield, I think. So that helps. I think with a lot of our players, that always seems to be the case. They always seem to have some sort of link to Mansfield or Nottingham or something like that. So that's obviously helped the deal. But yeah, I don't think he would have come here if he was expecting to not play. So yeah, I think he can go well next season. Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. How do you feel like the attack's looking generally? Because you mentioned there that you're not expecting Nigel Clough to be in the market for another attacking player. Do you think that's correct? Do you think ideally the club could do with one or two more? How would you assess things?
Yeah, it depends on the formation. So I'm not sure what formation we're going to be heading into the season with.
Do you think it'll flip? Do you think it'll flip between a few?
Yeah, I think so. So it will either be, there was 3 primarily that we used last year. So the diamond with 2 up front, the wing back system with 2 up front, or the 4-3-3. I don't think we've got the wide strikers to play the 4-3-3. That would be my only worry, and I think that is his preferred formation. That's why
I think Aikens is best as a wide forward, actually.
He hasn't shown that for us. I would say he's played best as the focal point.
Oh, really? Do you know, that really
Yeah,
surprised me, actually. Okay.
yeah. I mean, he's really turned it around, to be fair, Luke Akins, because last season, well, the end of last season and the start of this one, he was coming in for some criticism, but he's really turned it around. Some of his link-up play has improved. I think as he's got fitter with the amount of games he's been playing, and I like him as long as he's got someone off him with a bit of pace. I think he's big and strong. He can hold the ball up. Not necessarily the best in the air, but yeah, I think but I do think we need some wide players with a bit of pace. We've got Reece Oates, but
oh yeah, keeping him fit's going to be huge, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he was another one who never really got going last season, but the season before he looked, a big threat. Yeah. And I can see him playing in the 4-3-3 in one of the wide positions if he can get a bit fitter, because he does run out of gas a bit quickly, but he's definitely got the pace.
Yeah, he can come off the left as well, can't he? He likes to do that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he can shoot with either foot, to be fair. So yeah, that's a good option. But I would like a sort of an orthodox winger. We don't have any orthodox wingers in the squad.
Yeah, I think with wingers though, Sam, you've kind of got to be careful that if if the budget isn't huge like me or as big as it was in previous seasons, you've kind of got to make sure that you don't sign players just for the sake of another option. So if you sign a winger, you kind of got to make sure that they're comfortable playing as a wing back or maybe even as a super attacking fullback, so that they can play a part in the squad at a time when you don't have a dominant formation that incorporates wingers. Because if, say, you say you use a 4-4-2 diamond or a 3-5-2, and then that absolutely hits the ground running, and that becomes the default formation, then you've got these wingers who can't play as wing backs, and you're basically wasting a wage for large portions of the season. So I think that it's really important that there's an alignment right the way through recruitment, where okay, you want players to be able to offer something different, but only as part of a package that actually fits into the primary identity.
Yeah, I see what you're saying with that. It would just be nice sometimes to have that option in an ideal world off the bench, with a bit of pace, can perhaps get to the byline and put a cross in. But I do understand what you're saying. Perhaps the ideal thing there would be to, try and find someone through the academy, who wouldn't be expecting that many minutes, who could
like
come
wild
on and
cards type thing.
Yeah. I mean, we have got Davis Keeler-Dunn, who can operate in wide areas. He's more comfortable on the left, cutting in.
But he's a cutting in type. He's not a byline type.
He's not. No, he's not a pacey wide man.
Tell you what I like about Keeler-Dunn though, Sam, is that he's got that ice cool composure in the final third. I think he showed that with Oldham, possibly to an extent with Burton, where he scored a lot of goals early on last season, I seem to think. But he's got that ability to just pick up those pockets of space and then play a 1-2, and then he just seems to have, it's like the picture freezes for him, and he just makes good decisions in the final third. I don't know if you've seen too much of that in Field Mill, but I think he's got that in it, certainly.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's someone with the profile that we didn't necessarily have, who can play. The best game he had for me was when he played as a number 10 in the diamond, and then for some reason we didn't use that again, and I was a bit mystified by that. But yeah, he's very good at picking up pockets of space. He's not shy of having a shot from range either, which we've not seen too much of from the midfield players we've got. So yeah, he's a nice addition. I've got faith in him doing well this season.
Yeah, I think you probably, with him, you'd be looking at the diamond system at the tip of the diamond, as you say, or maybe if you're prepared to go with two sitting and Keeler-Dunn is the 10, I reckon you're probably going to need him to either give him a free roll as a number 10, or maybe at a stretch wide in a 4-2-3-1 where you've got a disruptive 10 in there, because I think if you play him wide in a 4-3-3, or sometimes I think that if you play him out wide, he struggles to track back a little bit. I don't know if that's naturally his game, so you've kind of got to think a bit carefully about the kind of role that you give him. But certainly in the right system, I think he's capable of being a top 7 player at this level and beyond. How's the midfield coming together?
Yeah, it's just going to be rolling on again with the same. I think we've got 6 players in there. So we've got Lewis Reed, Anthony Hartigan, George Maris, Ollie Clark, Stephen Quinn, and Hiram Boateng. So we've got 6 options in there. So that sort of covers when you play the diamond and when you play the 4-3-3. I think you perhaps look at them and say they're not the most mobile combination.
I
Maybe
was
Ollie.
going to say actually, Maris, Reed, and Hartigan, I would say, are quite similar stylistically as well. And sometimes you've been quite unlucky in that 2 of them have been injured, or all of them have been injured simultaneously, and it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
there was definitely times where we didn't have all 3 of them last season. That's a bit of bad luck. Obviously, Hartigan suffered with his shoulder issues, which hopefully with a long period of rest and a full pre-season, perhaps he can overcome that. Lewis Reed, we didn't see too much of. I think maybe 2 or 3 games. He got injured in his second game after
he
he
left him at
signed.
Swindon though, Louis Reed. So
yeah, I think he obviously likes the ball players in there, doesn't he, Clough? So perhaps with the upset. Well, Ollie Clark's not terrible on the ball, but he's not. I wouldn't describe him as a playmaking type. He's more of a disruptor.
drive forward.
Yeah, carries the ball. Makes a nuisance of himself. Provides a goal threat. So yeah, we for the last 3 or 4 years we've been very strong in midfield. Obviously we lost Lapsley last season, but I think Keeler Dunn has kind of filled his role in a different way. He's got different attributes, but he was sort of the attacking midfielder, if you like, Lapsley. So yeah, I think we're strong in midfield. I don't expect any signings in that area. It's just a case of hoping they all stay fit. Can Stephen Quinn do another full season at 37? I think he is now. But
he looks like he's 25, Stephen Quinn, when he plays sometimes, doesn't he?
Exactly, yeah. I think he was in the top 5 for minutes played last season, which is unbelievable. I don't think we would have liked to have used him as much as we did in an ideal world. But
fair play to him. You got to hand it to him, haven't you?
Yeah, he's an unbelievable player.
What a
he's he's excellent. It's just the occasional rush of blood to the head that some fans get annoyed with. But I think perhaps he was just doing it for a rest, three games off.
But you want to manage his minutes a bit next season, because this is another interesting point. You said you've got 6 senior midfielders there. I don't know if Cloughy likes any of the midfielders that have signed professional terms, whether he thinks of it as more like a 7. But if you're playing with a diamond, is there the possibility that you could do with 1 more midfielder, especially given the risks we've seen in recent seasons when it comes to injuries?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, we have got Keeler Dunn, who you could say could fit into the top of that diamond.
Of course, yeah.
We've also got John Joe O'Toole. He has played at the base of the diamond before, if absolutely necessary. It looks like we're not going to be renewing Kieran Wallace, who I thought he might have kept around as an option just for covering. He seems to be someone who's not too fussed with sitting on the bench. I'm sure he would like to play more, obviously, but he seems like a good lad who fits in around the squad. But it looks like he'll be heading elsewhere. But yeah, I think we've got enough in there. But it's just a case of if that injury crisis is gonna hit again. But yeah, you've got to think that sooner or later we're gonna have a season where it doesn't.
Yeah, that's what you're going to be hoping for, certainly. How many more additions are you looking at then? Because you've said there that I think you want to probably another left back, another centre back, another goalkeeper. So that brings us up to 3. But you've said there that there may be no more additions in midfield and in attack. So actually, a Mansfield quite close to the squad that's going to kick off.
I think so. Yeah. I think in an ideal world they'll all be in place for the 1st of July, when I think the pre-season's due to start. So yeah, I think 2 or 3 more. A goalkeeper. He says he's looking for a centre back to cover full back. I assume that's right back, because we've got 2 left backs. Even though McLaughlin's going to be missing until September. We've only got Callum Johnson really, who's a natural right back. So
I hope you can get a full season out of Callum Johnson, because without injuries, there's no way he's a League 2 player. He's much could
Yeah,
he went to Portsmouth a couple of years ago, didn't he? So definitely capable of playing higher.
yeah, we've seen flashes of that. I mean, he's been injured as well. So yeah, I mean, I think goalkeeper, perhaps one or two defenders, and I think that will be it. Unless, as you say, there's always the chance someone could crop up who's too good to turn down, and also we wouldn't have any loanees, so there's a chance that we could bring in someone on loan from Forest, as we did last year. We seem to have a good relationship with. And I think the benefit of having the squad in place for July is obviously you've got the full pre-season to work on it, and also if you do pick up injuries early on or in friendlies, you have got a long time to potentially look at bringing in loanees and things of that nature, which perhaps we haven't had in the past.
Yeah, Forest is an interesting one because the fact they're playing in the Premier League and they've got an incredibly big squad. They signed 20 players last summer, probably means that there's a few that are going to, that their under 23 squad is going to be massively bloated. So there's a few really good players who might slip down the pecking order a bit, where if they were playing in the Championship and they had a smaller squad, they might be closer to the Forest first team. So that, Burton had Dale Taylor on loan last season. So it shows that there's some really good players at Forest that maybe after a summer of pre-season training and that kind of thing, they might become available in August, and there's some opportunities where you can save yourself a space or two in the squad to maybe look at one of those opportunities.
Yeah, I can think of 5 off the top of my head loanees we've had from Forest in probably the last 5 years. So there's clearly a good relationship there. Obviously, Clough's got links there as well. I don't know if it'll be the same. I think, has Gary Brazil moved on now, the academy? Who's head of the academy?
On that one.
Yeah, I think he might have retired or moved on. So whether the link's still the same, I'm sure it would be. Obviously, we've just done a deal with Will Swan for them, so there's obviously a line open there. And obviously, that's another thing. Someone, a young loanee would know Will Swan automatically. That's always a bonus for players. I think if they know players and they can chat about it, and recommend things. So I think that's definitely an avenue which we could exploit if we do have issues early on.
Yeah, for sure. So in about a month's time, maybe just over, I've got to make my 1 to 24 predictions for League Two. So I kind of want to ask you a couple of questions with that in mind, Sam. What would be the biggest reason to go massively in favour of Mansfield Town finishing in the top 3 next season?
I think if Bailey Cargill can settle in, I think that's an automatic upgrade on what we had there. And the back four from January onwards wasn't as bad. I think the figures show perhaps a goal a game conceded from that point onwards from Alfie Kilgore coming in. So there's been a clear improvement in there. So if Cargill, can carry on that improvement and we can get who we want in goal, the attack's in place. Whether it'll perform the same again, who knows? But I think the last few seasons, we've been up there with the top scorers. So I don't think there's going to be an issue with scoring goals. They might not necessarily be, someone like a Danny Johnson, or if you like, who's going to be, the main man. But we've always got players who can chip in. But saying that, I think if Will Swan can, hit the ground running early, play plenty of games, I think he's a big reason to get behind Stags. It is going to be a very tough division next year. I think. Sure. I think I can already think of probably 12 or 14 teams who they're going for it, aren't they? Some of the signings teams are making.
There's new money coming into the league, I think, isn't there, as well? Like Gillingham has got new investment. There's Wrexham coming into the league. Notts County have signed David McGoldrick, for God's sake. I mean, it's going to be.
Stockport, obviously, they're not going to get any worse. I don't think they're only going to get better. Salford, they're always in and around, aren't they? So, Doncaster made a few good signings, I think.
Sure.
So it's going to be a tough one. I think that's the only concern with us standing still in midfield and attack. You sort of think, it's going to be. I think it's going to be harder. Do we need to improve? There seems to be maybe a bit of complacency that. Just because we were top scorers last season, that's got no effect on this season, really. Sure. So, You're
If
always looking.
Stephen Quinn, for example, has a drop off, which players,
Yeah,
once they go past 35, are always sort of prone to with the best will in the world.
yeah, and yeah, there's no guarantees is there that it's going to be the same. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's probably going to be one of the, or if not the toughest division to call next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I can sort of see what you mean in terms of the concern that if Mansfield don't massively improve their squad, which it doesn't look like the club is necessarily going to go all out to do that, is there the danger that they stay at the same level and the league gets back to,
Yeah,
I can see a concern. I do want to actually pick up on the Bailey Cargill point, which is I think he was part of the MK Dons side that won promotion from this level in 18-19, and he
yeah,
played a left-sided centre-back in a back three then, and he was kind of, I don't know if you've seen Jack O'Connell for Sheffield United, but he's kind of like a League Two equivalent of him, like an overlapping centre back, and he loves
yeah.
the basics of defending. So whether signing Bailey Cargill points more towards a back three with maybe Alfie Kilgore in the middle of it, and then maybe you sign a right side defender that can play centre back, right back, or right of three.
Yeah, I think that Clough did sort of say there is a centre back slash full back who's perhaps a wide centre back by the sounds of that he's very keen on, who's the number one target, but there's a lot of competition for. And he did say that if they do get this player, then there is the potential of that back three, as you say, of those three playing. So yeah, that's definitely something we could look at. I mean, if we are playing back three consistently, you perhaps worry about the cover at centre back. If it would be John Joe O'Toole, I think, is the only other one who we have.
But his lack of mobility isn't going to be as exposed much if in the middle of a back three, because if he's got quick centre backs either side of him, but then he's not going to be aerially dominant. I wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah, I'm thinking more in terms of his availability, or if his ability is at the same level as it was. Will he be competent enough to cover if there are injuries? I think they're still in discussion with James Perch over a new deal. So again,
Do you
another
have similar
old.
concerns to Perch with Stephen Quinn, where it's like they're incredible professionals and you don't want to go against them, but just the biology suggests that you're kind of likely, once you get to a certain age, there is that risk that you might drop off at any point.
Yeah, I mean, reading between the lines, that the fact he's not agreed a new deal yet, and there's been sort of some mentions by Clough that they're still in talks over a different role. You sort of think, is he going to be a player coach? Have they said to him, look, you're not going to play as much this year, you're just going to be a backup, and that's perhaps why he's hesitating. But I always think with older players, if you've just got them sitting around waiting to be a backup, then when they are called upon, they're not match fit. They're not necessarily the best players to bring straight into a team. But yeah, I don't think there's any indication that we'll be signing more than two defenders. So yeah, I think three at the back is an option. But again, yeah, it just
Whether
leave
there's
you.
whether there's another academy graduate who could come into the mix there as well as part of the squad.
Yeah, we do have George Cooper, who's had a pro contract for a few years now. I think he was on loan at Kettering last season, so a few levels
Kettering's
below.
National League North, are they? So
Yeah,
that's not
I think so. I think they might have got relegated. Don't quote me on that, but I think there was some sort of financial issues there, maybe. But yeah, I think the indication is that he will go out on loan again. But I think he is close to signing a new deal. So perhaps if he has a good pre-season, he could be one who's held around for the
Do you know
start
if
of the
he's a
campaign.
right footer or a left footer?
He's a right footer, yeah. He's not from I haven't seen him since probably last pre-season, but I think he's not the tallest. I think he's probably 6'1" maybe, but he looked decent. He was only playing against local, non-league sides, so hard to judge. But yeah, he didn't look too bad when I've seen him play. Whether he's ready for first team, I'm not in League Two. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm sure if there wasn't any potential there, then he was out of contract this summer, so I'm sure they would have look to move him on if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, well, let's hope he can progress, whether it's part of the first team squad or out on loan. So I'm just trying to build up a picture of players who can get into double figures for Mansfield Town next season. I think you've said you're confident Will Swan can get to around 15 goals. You've alluded to Ollie Clark being a potential goal scorer. He makes those direct runs from midfield, so you'd be hoping he can push 10. And then is there anyone else that I'm sure there was another name, maybe Lucas Akins.
Rito.
Reese Oakes, of course, yeah, if he can stay fit. Yeah, who would be the
Keeler
ones
Dunn, you could probably say between 5 and 10 if he plays well, has a good season.
Yeah, I think 10 is very realistic if he plays a lot.
Yeah. Akins is penalty taker. I think he got, I don't know how many he got last year, but I think he got around 10, not far off 10, maybe more. So yeah, I don't think this necessarily, apart from Will Swan, who I think has got potential to be natural goal scorer, there's perhaps not another one who you'd be confident on.
What do you think about Jordan Bowery, Sam? Because when I've seen Jordan Bowery at times in his career, it's like he's been so desperate to kind of graft in the channels that sometimes he's not always in the box into goal scoring position. So, yeah, what kind of season would you be expecting from Jordan Bowery?
Well, it sounded from Clough's press conference at the moment as if he's the chief backup for the fullback positions again. So I'm not sure about how many goals he's going to score next season. But yeah, I mean, I don't think his record sort of shows that he's not someone who's a prolific goal scorer, but he is someone who, he's got a bit of pace. He's quite strong. His first touch is decent. I don't see him playing many games as a striker next season. I might be wrong, but I think
even as part of his front two.
No, I can't see it. Maybe as if Akins gets injured or something, he might have to come in as the focal point. Perhaps can perhaps see him operating in one of the wide positions of 4-3-3. That's where Clough's tended to use him if he's going to use him as a striker.
Because I suppose the 4-3-3 can kind of morph into a 3-5-2 with if you've got someone like an Elliot Hewitt at right back who can also play right for 3, and then you've got Jordan Bowery kind of getting up and down, I suppose, and doing that role. So it's sort of a hybrid of 4-3-3 and 3-5-2. That can sometimes be what Clough goes for.
Yeah, I see Bowery as sort of the Clough's Mansfield version of Lucas Akins. Like, he's just happy to play him in any position. I think he trusts him. I think he even played at centre-back times last season in the Papa Johns and things like that. So, I mean, it was bizarre, but he's clearly got faith in him. He's clearly someone he likes. So, yeah, I expect another... I might put a bet, try and see if I can put a bet on Bowery starting in every single position next season.
Active position. You never know if both your goalkeepers get injured, then I'm sure Bowery would be the handy man for that.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the mood in the fan base, do you think, at the moment, Sam? Do you think Mansfield fans are excited about next season? Because you've been in the same league for 10 years now. So, how's the club finding things in terms of attracting new supporters? What's the sort of general vibe and mood in the camp?
Yeah, seems to be as excited as ever, if not more excited, really. We've sold, I think it was 4,300 season tickets. The early bird offer finished on Friday, so it's now into the full price tickets. Yeah, the club has introduced a direct debit option for fans, so I think that will probably attract quite a few people. It seems a attractive option of paying over 7 months, I think it is. So I think we sold 4,600 total last season. So to be at 4,300 with
mid-June, that's really
2 months to go. Yeah, so I think we'll probably surpass that figure you probably would have thought, or at least match it. So yeah, it seems as if the mood's as positive as ever. I think there's something about Clough. I don't know if it's just the name, but it does. People do have a certain romance about it. I think just perhaps people who are sort of casual fans. They
older Nottingham Forest fans that live in Mansfield, and that kind of there's an appeal of that.
Yeah, I think perhaps they might come down if Forest are away, and I think they do. The older generation, I think, particularly sort of latch on to that sort of thing, whilst perhaps it's maybe missed a bit on the younger generation. But I do think his name carries some weight at this level as to attracting fans, and yeah, like you say, there is probably there is a lot of Nottingham Forest fans in the area who can probably remember the glory days of his dad, and obviously his playing career at Forest. So yeah, I think there seems to be unwavering support, no matter, you know, as frustrated as I got with him at times last season and other fans. Some people just have blind faith, I think, in the name Clough at times, which, you know, I do get some responses on Mansfield Musings. You know, you got trusting Clough and this sort of thing. And you just think, well, you know, he's obviously a decent manager at this level, but you know, you don't have everything he says is not the gospel, is it? So it can be a bit frustrating at times. But yeah, there is obviously the numbers speak for themselves in terms of the season tickets, so you can't argue with that, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. What's your sort of gut instinct? I mean, I appreciate it's probably too early in the summer to have a real grasp on what the squad looks like, but at the same time, you're probably not a million miles off. So, where do you have it? What's your sort of early inkling, if to put it that way, for next season? And do you feel like, in terms of the expectation, it's the same as last year, where only top 7 these will do?
Yeah, I think expectation is the same, and I think that's probably mirrored by the board only giving Clough a 1-year contract with the option of an extension. It sort of says, you know, you've got to do better this year, or else. Sort of that's how
that is quite revealing, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think we've slightly improved. Yeah, I think we've improved on the squad from the start of last season. You'd have to say, with Cargill, seems to be a better option than Ollie Hawkins as a centre back. I would
McDonald as well, I think, is a good attacking left back. I think he could do well. Yeah,
he is. Yeah, and he'll be starting the season because McLaughlin's injured, so he'll have plenty of chance to impress. And it's nice
that
to just
takes
have
some of the weight off McLaughlin as well, I think, Sam.
Yeah, and obviously, as we spoke about many times, he's a natural left-footed defender or wing-back, whichever role he plays. So I think we've improved in those positions. The rest of the squad, if we get Christy Pym, so goalkeeper, midfield and attack is going to be exactly the same. So my only concern is whether we have improved enough against the potential of the other teams. We're already behind 3 of the teams from last season, so obviously we had injury issues and we were 1 goal behind Salford, so perhaps not that far behind. But Salford, Stockport, and who else am I thinking of? Bradford, yeah. So you'd think all 3 of those. I completely forgot about Bradford. You'd think Bradford are going to strengthen. Obviously a massive club for this league. So there's 3 teams that you think will strengthen. Then, as you say, Notts County and Wrexham. No guarantees, but you know, they seem to have the wherewithal and the managers who know the level to certainly be a threat. So that's 5 teams who will be challenging for sure. And then you've got the Gillinghams, as we spoke about. So it's just a case of whether, you know, it will be proven, I think, this season, whether the injuries were a valid excuse for Clough. Because
I think they were a valid factor, but I think it has a shelf life as well, for the reasons that we've kind of touched on. Sam, such a pleasure to chat Mansfield Town with you. I absolutely adore your insight on the Stag, so always lovely to catch up with you, mate. Any plans for some content with MTFC Musings for next season and beyond?
Yeah, I've been toying with a few things. I haven't quite decided where I'm going to go with it yet. I've been toying with sort of a newsletter or that sort of thing, or something along those lines. But yeah, it's something I'm going to put a bit of thought into. But yeah, it'll be the usual ramblings on Twitter to look forward to for everyone. Yeah, I'm hoping to be able to put a bit more behind it this year. It's just a case of whether I can motivate myself. That's always seems to be the issue. But yeah, hopefully we'll have a few more chats throughout the season, I'm sure. And it's been a pleasure being on.
Oh, legend. Cheers, Sam. And yeah, keep on rambling, mate. We absolutely love your stuff. This has been EFL Debate. Thanks to you for watching at home. We'll see you again next time.